Hi, folks. This is Adamelio Berkowitz. I'm here with a friend who has a really amazing story to tell. Something that I think I call it breadcrumbs in the forest that will lead us down the pathway to something really astounding about about October 7th last year, something we may not know about it, and probably no one knows about it. This is my friend Bruce Brill. Bruce you live in Toccoa, if I'm not mistaken,
Near Toccoa
near
in
Toccoa,
Nokadim.
in Nokdim, right, in Gush Etzion, he lives about halfway between Jerusalem and Hebron, but off to the side, more towards the Dead Sea. Apparently, a person who likes to be by himself and is it's well off the beaten track. Bruce, just to give you a little bit of a background, Bruce worked for the United States NSA, the National Security Agency, in 1973. After you were in the Army in intelligence in Vietnam. Is that correct?
During the Vietnam era, I was in the U.S. Army and I worked as an Arabic linguist and then a Hebrew linguist for NSA.
Okay. Um, now we're jumping right into it. So in those positions, you were focusing, of course, on the Middle East, Israel and our unfriendly neighbors. Um, so since you were in the NSA in 1973, as at that time it was Arabic, or it was Hebrew?
At the beginning, it was Arabic. At the beginning of the war, actually, because I could gist both languages, I had a very special job where I was monitoring live communication from the battlefront on the first days of the Yom Kippur War.
Okay, that's so. So tell me, what do you mean the live information? What kind of information were you monitoring?
Okay, well, I can't go into detail about it because the book that I wrote, this book, was authorized for publication by the Pentagon under two conditions. And one of them was that I redact what they require I redact. And one of the redactions is precisely that, the content of what I was listening to on the first days of the Yom Kippur War.
Okay, just if I may, a few details. The book that you just held up is the book that you wrote called "Deceit of an Ally: A Memoir of Military Anti-Semitism, the NSA's Secret Jew Room, and Yom Kippur War Treachery." Okay, and you wrote that book. It is available. I'll put the link up on the video and in the article. So take me to take me to October um October 6th, 1973. Actually, October 5th. What were you doing just before the Yom Kippur War?
Okay, well, let's go back to the 4th,
Okay.
because on the 4th, I was about to go home for the Yom Kippur weekend. And NSA is just outside of Washington, actually between Washington and Baltimore, near Laurel, Maryland. It's actually the address is Fort Meade, Maryland. And my supervisor told me, don't even think about going home to New York this weekend because we have a war on our hands for real this time because there were some false alarms earlier in the year.
Okay.
It,
Before we jump into this, allow me. Bruce was born Jewish, though at the time he was a secular Jew, not so connected to Judaism. But of course, we're talking about Yom Kippur, and you were planning, I guess, on going back to visit your family.
yeah,
And that would have been taking your vacation or taking time off from your job at the NSA. monitoring communications, live communications, real-time communications from the Middle East?
Actually, my job was different just before the war, very boring and very not interesting. I was tracking Israeli overflights of southern Lebanon, Syria, and northern Jordan.
Whoa, 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 wait a second. When you say tracking the oversights, you were monitoring Israeli communications?
No, Arab.
Arab communications. Okay.
Yeah. I'm
Okay.
very good with Arabic numbers.
Okay.
Is
Okay.
it,
So you were
the code?
listening in on Arab, I imagine it was radio communications,
Yeah,
um, reports, the Arab reports on the Israeli overflights.
right. Basically, that's it. And each coordinate I would mark on a map, and it's kind of my joke. My job was to connect the dots. And
Okay.
so I'm very good at connecting the dots.
Okay, and that was October 4th. And then your boss, who was, I imagine he was not Jewish.
Not
Um,
only not Jewish, but an anti-Semite
okay. We're not going to mention his
on
name.
top of that.
And he told you, don't even think about it. He said that there was going to be a war?
He said it's not only going to be a war, but when I confronted him and I said, look, Mike, we had these false alarms in January, in February, in May, a big false alarm. So certainly this is another false alarm. And he said, no, this time it's a val. And that's an NSA terminology meaning no doubt.
I'm sorry, could you A as in the letter A?
Yeah,
Val, VAL?
val, like value.
Okay, just for people who are unfamiliar, the Yom Kippur War, for a lot of reasons, mostly political and military intelligence failures, they caught Israel by surprise, and it was one of the more devastating, if not the most devastating war in Israeli history, because they caught us off guard. Even though there were enough indications, the army and the government chose to ignore the indications, and we were caught totally off guard.
Right. And I can explain how that happened.
Okay. But meanwhile, you're telling me that despite the fact that Israel was going to be caught off guard, the NSA had foreknowledge that there was going to be an attack on Israel, a massive attack. um, from especially from the Egyptian side, they overran the Bar Lev line, and thousands of Israeli soldiers were caught behind lines. It was devastating. And you're saying that the NSA knew and did not tell the American ally Israel?
Well, on the first day of the war, when I was monitoring live communication, and I can't go into detail because that was required of me to redact from my book. I'll show you. You see all the redactions here.
Hmm.
And that's
Sure.
basically the conversation that I was listening to. What I understood, I can't go into detail, but what was clear was that the Israelis were caught with their pants down around their ankles. And I was surprised that they were surprised. Why? Because already on October 4th, 2 days before, it was more than 2 days before, I knew that Syria and Egypt were going to attack Israel. I knew this definitively, and I knew it was going to happen on Saturday, Yom
Whoa.
Kippur. I
Whoa.
knew all of this.
Whoa. And you weren't like the head of the NSA who had some super top secret, can't tell anyone information. Apparently, this was already trickling down in the NSA. There were people who knew it.
Right. And the reason that I knew it is because my supervisor knew it before I did.
That's crazy.
And I had a higher than top secret clearance, yet I was one of the lower men on the totem pole. I was just a specialist fourth class. It sounds like a high rank, but it's not at all. It's a low rank. It's not even a sergeant.
Okay. But they needed someone who spoke the language, and it was you.
Well, they trained us in the language. It was a 47-week Arabic language course, which was inadequate, by the way, and they upped it after 9/11. They realized that the intelligence was inadequate, and they upped the 47 weeks to 52 weeks.
So, okay, so you got the word not to go home for Yom Kippur, and you got the word that there was absolutely going to be a war on Yom Kippur. And so you're sitting there in the NSA, and the messages start coming in that you're translating. Were you still doing the boring numbers overflights in
No,
Arabic?
no, 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 because I could just both Arabic and Hebrew, so I was monitoring live communication on the first days of the Yom Kippur War.
That must have been terrifying because it was not pretty.
As I told you, um, I picked up this one Israeli soldier and understood from his conversation with whoever he was speaking to, and I better not go into detail, that they were caught with their pants down. And my being surprised that they were surprised turned me into an instant Zionist
Wow.
because something was wrong that we knew and we didn't get the information to the Israelis, particularly the Israelis on the front line. Something smelled. And I became an instant Zionist and swore to myself that I would come to Israel as soon as I was discharged from the army.
So, because of our previous discussion, um, so you discovered not only did you discover that the U.S. was intelligence community was not being helpful to their ally Israel, but you also made another discovery after the outbreak of the war, what you called the Jew room. Um, I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but could you tell us about that?
Sure. Okay. So I just remarked casually that my supervisor at the time in the Arabic division he was a Jew hater. I don't like to use the term anti-Semite because he loved the Arabs and their Semites,
Mm.
but he was a Jew hater. And to make a long story short, I won't go into detail. I was transferred to the Hebrew division, and I was working with the Hebrew language at the time. And the head of the Hebrew department was my roommate. And at a social event of the people in the Hebrew division, he got drunk. He loved alcohol, and he got drunk, and he confided in me that there are rooms in NSA that you can't get into because you're a Jew. I didn't know at the time that it was called the Jew room. I learned the term, the Jew room, from John Loftus, who wrote a
Sorry.
book
Oh,
called
okay.
the Secret War Against the Jews.
Yeah.
Okay, and
He's John Loftus. I'm looking at his Wikipedia page. He's a pretty interesting guy. He was a former high-level U.S. government prosecutor,
right,
former Armory intelligence officer,
right.
and oh wow, he's also the president of the Florida Holocaust Museum.
He was. He was.
Yeah,
Right.
and he also wrote books about a purported CIA Nazi connection. And one of the books, yeah, The Secret War on the Jews.
And one thing that you're not reading there is that he's not Jewish.
Oh my. Okay. So how did you connect with John Loftus?
Okay, back in 96, when he published his book, he got in touch with me and we had what to talk about because in his book, he actually interviewed members of the Jew room. And he said it's an absolute misnomer. Why? Not only are Jews not allowed entry into these rooms, that's number one. Number two, they're not supposed to know that they exist. And number three, it's not one singular room, it's multiple rooms.
So this was John Loftus basically confirmed to you what you had been told by your drunken roommate.
Right,
So now you knew for a fact. I mean, he was a high-ranking intelligence officer. So now you know for a fact that the Jew room was not a myth.
right. And they work against Israel.
Whoa.
And if you're sitting down, according to John Loftus, they work against American Jews.
I I am speechless. Wow. Okay. And so this was all in operation. Do you know when the Jew rooms began? I mean, he claims there was a John Loftus claims there was a Nazi CIA connection. I've also heard that, for example, with the American space program, a lot of the rocket scientists came from Germany, were Nazi scientists.
True, true.
So,
Yeah,
so
he
this
documents all this in his book.
right. So the Nazi connection is not like crazy UFO
No, oh
theories.
no, no, no. It's well documented.
I'm just wondering how would they work against American Jews?
That's not clear to me exactly,
I mean,
except
I can understand, actually, strangely enough, I can understand, Israel's a foreign country. Sometimes, though, really not often, Israeli interests may not be identical to American interests in the region. They're not. I also want to add that this is kind of like an anti-Semitic trope, which is that you can't trust the Jews. They have dual loyalty, so you can't trust them. So they have to keep them out of these seats of power.
well, you know what, Adam? In 2020 hindsight, I believe that that's one of the reasons that I was given this very peripheral job at NSA.
Uh, uh.
And the peripheral job, not only was it not intriguing, um, but it also required on normal days maybe a half hour worth of work. And
So,
so I had to fill the rest of my 9 hours at work looking busy. And so I learned Hebrew. I learned Hebrew. I began learning Hebrew.
you're saying that they sidelined you, kept you away from anything that might be significant.
I think so. I mean, in 2020 hindsight, also in 2020 hindsight, there was a room that I had to walk through. Now, again, I had higher than top secret clearance, and there were closed rooms within NSA. And when I was working in the Hebrew division, it was in a closed room, and you had to know the code to press the key to open the door to get in. When my supervisor was sent to Australia during the war, I needed to communicate with him, and there were no annoying mobile phones back then. So we would communicate with telex. And the telex room was on the other side of another closed room that I did not have entry to. And it never seemed questionable to me uh, to wonder why I couldn't get into this room without first pressing a bell, showing my badge to a camera, and then waiting maybe 5 minutes for someone to open the door and allow me to come in.
You with your more than top secret clearance.
With my higher than top secret
I guess they
clearance
had to. They took them a few minutes to put away all the stuff they didn't want you to see, and
and
then
with my access to the closed Hebrew division room. But one time, while I was waiting the 5 minutes, someone left, opened the door, and I stuck my foot in the door and went in before I was officially
supposed to go in.
allowed entry.
Yeah.
And when I went in before the 5 minutes was up, I saw on the back wall a curtain closing over a map of Israel.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say something like, a Nazi symbol or a Nazi
No,
flag.
no, no. So again, in 2020 hindsight, that big room might have been one of the rooms of the Jew room. I mean,
Okay.
I can't say definitively, but
Okay.
could be.
Now let's jump forward just a tiny bit. Wait a second. Now I can't find it. Okay. Um, I can't. Wow. Um, I sent you I sent you a link that now I can't find on my computer. Let me see if I can find it on my phone. Um, maybe I sent it to you on Facebook. Now this I know this is sounding very strange to people who are listening. But as I said, the interests of the American government do not always coincide with the interests of of Israel. Um, okay. And so there was a report, it kind of flew under the radar. It was earlier this month, on November 15th, there was a CIA employee. He was accused of leaking classified information about Israel's plans to attack Iran. Okay, actually, it happened but it happened early in November. Um, and the guy's name was Asif William Rahman. And he was arrested, and they're investigating him that he gave over plans of Israel's plans to attack Iran to Iran. He leaked them. People don't know this, but this actually happened several times. It happened under Obama when Obama didn't want Israel to attack Iran's nuclear facilities or even overfly. So his administration would leak those plans. There were reports that the Biden State Department gave the names of 10 Mossad agents to Iran in order to gain trust and facilitate the negotiations a few months ago. So even though Israel and the USA are allies, that doesn't mean that it's like a beautiful, faithful relationship. There have been these whoopses. So you got a glimpse, your foot in the door of the Jew room and what was going on there, and you absolutely know that America had pre-knowledge of the '73 war, which would have saved thousands of IDF soldiers' lives who when the attack started. I mentioned the Bar-Lev line. One of the reasons the Bar-Lev line was overrun was it was undermanned and it was under didn't have enough supplies, weapons, and medical supplies or any of the supplies they needed, and so they were just overrun. And had they known in advance, they could have taken care of that. They could have supplied it, sent some men down, but that didn't happen because we didn't know. Even though what you're telling us is the NSA absolutely did know in advance, at least just the NSA, maybe even other branches of the U.S.
Okay.
intelligence
Now,
community.
now, now the explanation for it.
Okay,
Not only did NSA know, but Israel intelligence also knew. Israel intelligence had all kinds of indications that an attack was imminent. And I could go into detail about how they knew. But what I want to address is how come they were duped, even though they knew, even though
okay,
there were all kinds of indications. Okay, because of the rooms that were off limits to me because I was a Jew, I was troubled by this and troubled by the fact that Israel was caught with her pants down. And something smelled, and I wanted to make sense. I wanted to connect the dots. And one of the things that I did was to pick up a phone and call General Eli Zaira. He was the head of Israeli military intelligence at the time. And he invited me to his home on July 4th, 6.5 years ago. And again, he invited me to his home twice. And he confided in me that he received an American intelligence assessment from his American colleagues that worked in intelligence that Egypt and Syria have no intention of attacking on or before October 6th. And he relied on the American assessment over all kinds of indications that Israel intelligence had in their hands. And this General Eliezer, to his credit, had great uh, talent of persuasion. And he persuaded not only Golda Meir, but he also persuaded Moshe Dayan, General Moshe Dayan, and General David Elazar, who was the chief of staff, that to ignore Israeli military intelligence that the Arabs are not going to attack.
just to
And
fill
that's
people in, Eli Zaira, he was a major general in the IDF, and in the '73 Yom Kippur War, he was the director of Amman, which is Israel's military intelligence. And because of his failure, the Agranat Commission after the war, they found Zaira to be negligent of his duty, and he resigned. He resigned the army in
he,
disgrace.
he didn't resign, he was forced out,
Well, okay, he was forced out in disgrace.
right? Um,
Okay.
so he asked me, how do I explain the fact that I was lower rank and I knew that the Arabs were going to attack, but he was head of Israel military intelligence. He didn't know. So I said, apparently you were duped by the
Mm.
generals, the American generals that you were in touch with. And he said, no, they loved Israel and they would not have duped him consciously. Enter the Jew room. The intelligence had to have been manipulated before it got to Eliezer Era's buddies, the American generals that he was getting intelligence assessments from.
Okay. That so okay. I want to jump ahead. Um, I mentioned how American intelligence, you have a CIA agent who is giving over Israeli attack plans to to our enemies, plans to retaliate and attack Iran. But from what you're telling us about the Jew room and what happened in the deception from the American intelligence community before the Yom Kippur War that cost Israel so tragically, I think we can say, hey, wait a second. I mean, in Israel, we're saying, how did the IDF get duped? What was the IDF intel failure that led to October 7th? But at the same time, we can also ask, wait a second. American intelligence should be even better because Israel was probably giving them all the intelligence they knew, and America was also playing the other side. They were getting
Well,
intelligence from other sources that don't connect with Israel. British intelligence, probably also some of the Arabic countries were also in touch with America. So America certainly knew even more than Israel.
I can,
And
I can bear witness to that.
okay,
I'll give you an example. A man that I became friendly with shares my last name, a man named Shabtai Brill, an Israeli officer that worked in intelligence, and he was the pioneer of using drones to gather intelligence. What he did was, I mean, this is back in the late 60s and the early 70s. He bought American toy planes that were remotely controllable, and he affixed cameras to take still photographs. And he sent these planes over the Suez Canal to take photographs of Egyptian military installations. How far could they go? Maybe a couple hundred yards, and then they had to come back. And what kind of photographs were they taking? Not very high quality photographs. At the same time, I saw in NSA photographs from satellite photography that we had where I could read the name of the Israeli soldier off of his kippah.
and
And
this
this
was
was
this was
over
in
the entire,
73. This was in
in
73.
73, 74. This actually I saw the photographs in 74. But um, these satellite photographs were not 1 or 200 yards maximum over the Suez Canal. It was over the entire area. Whatever we
Mm.
wanted to photograph could be photographed to with great precision.
So
So Eliezer Era was not stupid, and he's very brilliant. By the way, he's still alive. He's almost 97 years old.
God bless him. God bless him. I hope he lives to see some justice.
Yeah, he's not stupid. So his relying on the American assessment over his own intelligence
Mm.
indicators from Israel was smart.
By the way, just as an aside, um, Joe Biden on his first overseas junket as a congressman was to the Middle East. And when he came back, he met with Golda Meir, and she expressed concern about an Egyptian attack. And Joe Biden assured her, he said, no, 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 I was just there. They assure me that they have no intention of attacking Israel. And that's what Joe Biden told Golda Meir. Are you familiar with that story?
Yes, I am.
And
So you're saying
he tells it
maybe he
differently.
was an accomplice.
He tells it differently these days. So I'd really like to jump forward because, like I said, the parallels, the similarities between what happened, the intelligence failure in Israel of October 73, and what we saw last year in October of 2023, they're very, very similar. And I hate to say this, but after the Yom Kippur War in 1973, it was the first time we had a right-wing government. The left-wing government fell for the first time in Israeli history. Golda Meir was voted out because of the failures. There were a lot of faces that changed in the Israeli government, and these people really like their jobs in the government. And it's a known thing that I mean, Israelis were very quiet about it, but we know that as soon as the dust clears enough, there's going to be elections, and we know who blew it. We know who failed. And there's going to be a big change in Israeli politics. It's time for the changing of the guards because of that. And so a lot of people in the government are probably maneuvering to keep their positions and to keep their power. So the question is, how far are they willing to take it? Are they willing to lie? Are they willing to deceive? Are they willing to try to cover up um, a failure in that maybe they did know or they should have known? So what happened? What do you think? And I want to emphasize this. Now we're going off what we've spoken about up until now is fact. It's things that Bruce himself witnessed, was involved in and had absolute knowledge of. Now we're getting, I think, into the area of conjecture, and everything we're doing now, everything we're talking about now, will have the big question of perhaps,
Okay,
maybe.
before we get to conjecture, I just want to add one other fact.
Sure.
Um, 51 years ago, in October, there were all kinds of indications from the front lines that the Egyptians and the Syrians were preparing an imminent attack. There were all kinds of observations from the front line, and they were summarily ignored. And one indication I can give you, I met a man named Dani Ben Yaakov, and this was thanks to the finger of God. It's less coincidence and more God incident that I met this man. A British, okay, British gentleman with a very sophisticated British accent that I met. He was an advisor to the command staff. And the day before the Yom Kippur War broke out, he said there's a contingency plan that requires the removal of all the soldiers from the Bar-Lev line back to safety because the Bar-Lev line was not defensible. It was known that it wasn't defensible. To withdraw the boys, in their place, put high explosives that were remotely detonatable, allow the Egyptians to come across and gather at the different fortifications along the Bar-Lev line and blow them to smithereens. It wouldn't have been seen as an aggressive move. If anything, it's defensive. You're withdrawing your boys, and it would have saved them because most of the over 400 soldiers that were on the Bar-Lev line were either wounded, killed, or captured, most of them. And it's sad that they weren't withdrawn. But this Dani Ben Yaakov, when he said, let us execute this contingency plan. Eli Zaira, who pooed him, gave him a hand signal like that, and swung around in his chair. That's what Dani Ben Yaakov told me, and it's a true story. It was ignored. Not only that, there were all kinds of signs from soldiers on the front line. This Moti Ashkenazi, for instance, he even started a political party after the war because he was trying to notify higher ups that there are Egyptian preparations, clear preparations for an attack. And he was ignored. Same thing a year ago.
Okay.
Before,
Okay.
now we're getting
Now we're
there.
jumping ahead to October
Yeah,
2023, and
same thing.
this is when the mud gets deep.
Same
Okay.
thing. Now there are girl spotters all
Oh
along
my
the
God.
border, and they were trying desperately
Yeah.
to alert the higher ups that there's a movement that's going to take place. All kinds of worrisome signs. There was a
If I can
man.
jump in here, I've actually been on a forward post in the Jordan Valley, and we used to have these huge binoculars that were mounted on the in the ceiling, and we'd be watching the Jordanian soldiers. I don't know how they did. They would sleep outside at night. They were just like a jeep would drop them off along the border, and these poor guys would be outside all night. You know, they weren't allowed to have campfires, and they just sat there in the desert all night long. But I've watched them, and apparently these girls, I mean, they're much more sophisticated. It was the Gaza border. There's touch sensitive fences. These aren't just chain link fences; they're touch sensitive fences, and it is high tech. We even had, and I'm sure they have something even better now. We had an anti personnel radar that was developed in Texas to track cattle. So it would pick up movement in the desert. That's what we had. I'm sure they had something much more sophisticated. And these poor girls, they were like looking at the border all day, every day. And they were saying, look, we see these Hilux pickup trucks driving back and forth. They're looking at us while we're looking at them. They were talking about all the, they were seeing weapons, they were seeing preparations. And in the end, these poor girls were literally slaughtered. They were herded into rooms and bunkers, and they were burned alive in the bunkers. And some of them were captured, but most of them were just literally slaughtered in the most horrific way possible. And they were IDF soldiers. And it used to be it's a very good position for girls because it's much more social. It's not combat. It's absolutely vital. And so we that's why we had young girl spotters in the Jordan Valley as well. But now when I meet young girls who are in the IDF and I'm like, what's your job? And they're like, I'm Tatspitanit, I'm a spotter. I'm just like, oh my. And I mean, they're on the front line, but they're not combat troops.
Right. So, in addition to the spotters, I met a man named Shmulik Pfefferman who was monitoring Syrian military communication. And the day before the war, there were three clear signs that the following day they were going to attack. And he passed this information on to headquarters. And again, he was ignored. Now, when I told Eli Zaira in his home across the kitchen table from him that we knew in advance, he held back crying. He held back tears. I can demonstrate how he
So where did you hear
reacted
that?
when
Where did you? I'm sorry. Where did you hear that there were Syrian communications that were intercepted that said that they were ready to attack?
a man named Shmulik Pfefferman.
And what was his position?
He was a what's called in Hebrew a kashav. He was monitoring. That was
Okay.
his job in
Wow.
intelligence. Yeah.
Okay. So I remember when I was in the army, we also know that there's really not a separation between Hezbollah and Hamas and Syria. They all work together. So if there was an attack by a Hamas and even an attack in Shomron or a buildup, we knew to expect something on the other fronts as well.
Okay. So now, in Golda Meir's autobiography and in Moshe Dayan's writings, both of them said that even foreign intelligence services were duped. And I, I asked Eli Zaira, were these foreign intelligence services that you relied on, were they the Americans? And his answer was he closed his mouth, closed his eyes, and answered like this.
Okay, so let's
So
jump back.
he was holding back the hurt when he realized that he was duped by this
Okay, so
false
let's
assessment.
jump back to October 2023,
Right.
where we have communications that Syria is planning on attacking. What's and that's not confirmed. It's not, but it's out there and it's as something that should be investigated. We'll call it a hint or a clue. So, did you have any other hints or clues that what happened in 73 might have also happened in last year?
Yes. And this is conjecture.
Okay.
Um, Eliezer body language when he realized that he was duped, that he was given a false assessment, holding back, crying.
Sure.
I don't know if you saw the announcement by last year's intelligence head, Aharon Haliva, when he announced his resignation. In none of the Western media or the Israeli media, the American media, did they show his announcement from the very beginning of his talk. But I caught it on a strange, obscure news network, Hindustan Times. They showed,
I've actually gotten some good news stories from them.
right, they're unbelievable. They showed his talk from the very beginning. And unlike Eli Zaira, who held back his crying, Aaron Haliva actually cried because I believe that he also realized that he was duped. That's the way, again, this is conjecture. I can't know that. I didn't speak with Aharon Haliva. I would love to and ask him if he received intelligence assessments from his American counterparts.
I want to point out he resigned, though one of the questions that a lot of Israelis are asking right now is, hey, wait a second, there has not really been an investigation into October 7th, which is it's inexplicable. You know, the most the one of the biggest intelligence failures in Israeli history, the largest mass attack by Hamas, the largest terrorist attack, the most Jews killed since the Holocaust, and no investigation. Just, a resignation of the guy who should have answered a lot of questions.
Okay, I would like to introduce you to another name who I believe could be central. Dr. Professor Yaakov Hizdai. Professor Yaakov Hizdai is also a high officer, and he was on the Agronaut Commission. And when I told him my story, and I asked him, was foreign intelligence influence checked by the Agronaut Commission? He said, no, it was not
I'm sorry,
touched.
the Abernov Commission is what?
The Agronaut Commission that investigated the intelligence failure 51 years ago during the Yom Kippur War, I asked him, because he was an investigator on the Agronaut Commission,
Mm-hmm.
did they check into foreign intelligence influence on Israeli intelligence? I mean, that's my story.
Right.
And he said, no, they didn't touch it.
Okay. So was he involved also in the October 7th? Yaakov
No,
Hasai?
no, no, no. He's in his late 80s. He's uh,
Right. He's
he's
86 years old
he's
now.
also still alive and um, with it.
So, what indications, even just what it looks like from the outside to you, um, you said that there were people who were on vacation or were not at their posts on October 7th. One of the big questions about October 7th is not only that it happened, but the response was I mean, Israel's a small country. It's not like you have to fly in troops from overseas. And a lot of the people were sitting in their shelters for 7, 10, 12 hours before the IDF showed up. And you, if I'm not mistaken, you had told me that there were people who were not high-ranking people who were not at their posts at that time. Is that correct?
Aharon Haliva himself, the head of Israeli military intelligence at the time, why was he on vacation in Eilat? That weekend, he was
Mm,
on vacation in Eilat, and he was warned. He was given warnings that it looks like something might be afoot. And he says, call me in the morning.
he
Of
was
course,
given
in the
warnings
morning, it was too late.
by the spotters. And who else was warning him?
Other people in the military, in intelligence, were trying to alert him, and he was neutralized, just as Eli Zaira was neutralized
So
by
what you're so
something.
in the Yom Kippur War. So what you're saying is that just as in 73, there were hints that something might be up. But the American intelligence intervened and said, look, no, we have the inside track. We know what's going to happen, and it's not going to be an attack. So Israel got caught with its pants down. And you're saying, well, it seems like the same thing happened last year on October 7th, that there were people on the ground who were saying, look, we're seeing Hamas people moving around, getting ready, arming up. Um, and we think that this is not a good situation. And you're saying that that Haliba, General Haliba, he was actually he was a major general, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, major general, what we call an aluf. And you're saying he all of a sudden, even despite these hints that were coming, that were percolating up from the lower ranks, he didn't take them seriously. So you're saying maybe the reason that he didn't take it seriously was because he got told by American intelligence that there was really nothing to worry about. And
Well,
American intelligence and his reasoning was American intelligence should surely know. And so
I,
you're saying that's a possibility.
I can testify that this was the case 51 years ago. I can only assume that it probably was the case a year ago.
It's looking like it.
It sure smells like it.
and 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 if it smells like it, it should have been investigated. Though now that Aharon Haliba is not in his function and he's retired, there's a really good chance it'll never be investigated
I
unless
I don't know. Look, the Yom
unless
Kippur
another
War,
Bruce Brill steps forward 50 years from now.
50 years. Look,
Then we might know.
The Yom Kippur War lasted 3 weeks. This war is
Is already over a year.
over a year. So the Agranat Commission wasn't commissioned until the war ended, until after the war ended. So they're
Mhm.
waiting for this war to end before they begin investigating.
Mm. I
But
so when I'm confronted with things like this, that some people say, oh, it's a conspiracy theory, there's no reason, there's no facts. I always say yes, but there are questions that have some validity. There are hints that something may have happened. And if there's no investigation, well, that's a problem. That is the problem, actually. So, and unfortunately, right now, the excuse is, oh, we're at war. We don't have time for an investigation.
if any of your listeners have access to Aharon Haliba and can arrange for me to meet with him and ask him if, like Eli Zaira, he got comforting assessments from the Americans.
So that is the question. Did the IDF intelligence receive any intel from the American intelligence community that would have told them, no, there's not going to be a Hamas attack?
That's my big question.
That is the big question. Wow. Okay. And unfortunately, I mean, like I said, the biggest stinky fish in the room is that there has been no investigation, or at least no investigation that the public has been informed of.
But again, the Agranat Commission that investigated the Yom Kippur War fiasco never inquired about foreign influence.
Ooh, ooh. So if I can make 2 points, one point is this is important not just as a matter of truth. It's important that truth comes out, but it's also, as an Israeli who lives in the Golan, um, if I want to be feel safe in my home, I need to know that the IDF and the Israeli government are making accurate assessments based on good intelligence and not accepting bad intelligence from the CIA, which has proven to be a nefarious source of intelligence for Israel. So that's a big concern. For me to return home safely or stay home safely, I need to know that that's not going to happen again. So that's and also tzedek tzedek tirdof. We have to go after justice. We have to make sure that the guilty parties are held accountable. That's
And one thing I want to say very clearly, even though the title of my book sounds somewhat anti-American, it's not.
no, absolutely not. Yeah, I mean,
I
to
say
see,
it's anti-American
right.
because there's a cancer within the intelligence community, this anti-Israel cabal
This CIA
working
officer who
working against an American ally and also working against American stated
right,
policy.
right,
In 1983, there was an intelligence exchange agreement between Israel and America. Okay, this didn't exist in 1973, but it existed in 1983 and subsequent. So there should have been an intelligence exchange, sharing, particularly vital, the critically vital intelligence with the Israelis.
okay. Bruce, you've given us an awful lot of information about what happened in 73, and you've given us a lot to chew on about what might have happened if it was repeated in last year, a really nefarious intelligence operation. I can't thank you enough. I hope more people are going to be asking these questions. Um, yeah. So I guess that's at least the three-quarters of a story that people are going to have to chew on for a while.
Right.
I'll put the link to your book on Amazon, so people can check that out. So I guess yeah, the more you see what happened in '73 about how America really did mislead Israel to with tragic results, um,
And again, it's not America
it's not
that duped
America.
Israel. It's
You,
this cancer within the intelligence community.
you know, it's like I look at America and it's like you have, and that's why I mean, thank God for this last election. You have people in the State Department, and entire administrations that are based on enabling Iran, um, despite overwhelming opposition to the Islamist regime. They prop up the Islamist regime, open up the floodgates of their economy, and while they're literally calling for death to America, they're also calling for death to Israel. So it is anti-American. There are anti-American elements within the American government, within the American intelligence community. We were coping with it back then, and I think we're coping with it now. It's pretty nefarious. Okay, Bruce, I can't thank you enough. Hopefully we gave some good information to our listeners. Thanks so much, Bruce. Be blessed and be blessed, y'all. God
Thank you,
willing,
Adam. Thank you, Adam.
God willing, good times are coming.